My son texted me the night before his wedding to tell me not to show up. He said his bride couldn't stand the thought of me sitting in the crowd looking like what I am. I read that message 4 times. Then I opened a drawer, took out a folder I'd been keeping for 11 years, and made 3 phone calls that turned his perfect day into the worst day of his life. If you've ever bled yourself dry for someone who decided you were an embarrassment, do me a favour and hit that subscribe button, because this one is for you. And stay till the end, because what I found in my garage the next morning is the part I still can't talk about without my hands shaking. My name is Ray Sutton. I'm 64 years old, and I live alone in a brick ranch house on the edge of Kansas City that I paid off 2 decades ago. My wife Eleanor passed 4 years back. Cancer took her slow, the way it likes to, and it left the house too quiet, and the other side of the bed too cold. I keep her reading glasses on the nightstand. I know that's a strange thing for a grown man to admit, but I do it anyway, and I don't much care who thinks it's foolish. That night I was sitting at the kitchen table with a rag and a can of leather balm, working oil into the seat of an old wallet Eleanor gave me back in 1989. The house smelled like coffee and machine oil, the way it always does, because those 2 smells followed me home from the shop every day for 40 years and never really left. It was a Thursday. My son Danny was getting married on Saturday, and I had my one good suit hanging on the closet door, pressed and ready, and my dress shoes sitting by the door with a shine I'd put on them myself. I spent 40 years under trucks. I started out as a diesel mechanic, flat on my back on a creeper with brake dust in my teeth, and I clawed my way up from there. I bought my first bay when I was 31. By the time I was 50, I owned Sutton Fleet Services, and Sutton Fleet ran repair, brokerage, and 3 warehouse yards that moved freight up and down the middle of this country. I sold most of it 7 years ago. I kept the real estate. Nobody in Danny's world knows that. They see the rust on my truck and the flannel on my back, and they think they've got me figured out. Danny is 27. His hands are soft. I made sure of that. I put him through a private high school and then through college, so he'd never have to know what it feels like to lose a fingernail to a lug wrench in January. He drives a Lexus that I bought and titled in my name for the insurance, and he tells his friends he leased it with his own signing bonus. I let him keep that story. A father lets his boy have his little lies. That's part of the job. My phone lit up on the table around 9. I figured it was Danny calling to talk through the seating chart, or maybe just to say something nice, the way a man might the week he gets married. I wiped my hands on the rag and reached for it. It wasn't a call. It was a text. I put my glasses on and read it. Dad, I need you to hear me out and not make this a thing. Sabrina's really overwhelmed with the whole family side, and honestly, it's easier if you just sit this one out. Her people are a different world. Old Greenwich money. The whole deal. You'd be uncomfortable and so would they. She said she can't relax knowing you'll be there looking like you just came off a job site. I'll send you pictures. Please don't call. I don't have the energy tonight. Love you. I read it again. Then I set the phone face down on the table and I sat there in the quiet for a long time, looking like I just came off a job site. I looked at my hands. There's a burn scar across the back of my right one from a manifold that was hotter than I gave it credit for in 1994. There's a permanent black line under 2 of my nails that no amount of scrubbing ever took out. These hands changed Danny's diapers when Eleanor was too weak from her first round of chemo to lift him. These hands signed a check for his college the same week I was working 18-hour days to cover it. These hands had held Eleanor's while the monitor went flat. And these were the hands his fiancée couldn't stand to look at. I didn't feel angry at first. That surprised me. What I felt was something colder and heavier, like a wrench dropping to the bottom of a full toolbox. It was the feeling of a man realizing he built his whole life on top of something rotten and never checked the foundation. He didn't even call me, 27 years old, and he sent a text and told me not to call back because he was tired. That's what got me. Not the words, the fact that he was too tired to say them to my face. I stood up. My knee popped. The bad one. The one that's been going since a transmission Jack slipped in 2001. I walked to the cabinet over the fridge and I took down the bottle of bourbon. Eleanor bought me the Christmas before she got sick. I don't drink much anymore. But that night I poured 2 fingers and I drank it standing at the sink, looking out the window at the dark backyard, and I let the burn wake me up. Then I did what I always do when the ground shifts. I got quiet and I started thinking, here's what my son doesn't know about me. He doesn't know that the condo he and Sabrina live in downtown, the one he thinks he rents from a management company, sits inside an LLC that I control. I bought it 3 years ago so my boy would have a nice place to start his marriage. They pay $1,100 a month. The market rate on that unit is closer to 32. I've been eating the difference and moving it around on paper so the books look clean, because I didn't want him to feel like he owed me anything. I wanted him to feel like a man who could afford his own life. He doesn't know that the $90,000 I wired to the Ashford estate for his wedding was not, as he assumes, most of my savings. He thinks he's slowly draining a tired old man who runs on social security and love. He thinks the credit card in his wallet has a limit I struggle to pay off every month. He believes all of that because I let him, because I thought I was protecting him. And there's one more thing he doesn't know, and this is the one that mattered most that night. He doesn't know that Sabrina's father, Preston Whitlock, the great pillar of old Greenwich money, is broke. I know because I'm the man keeping him afloat. 2 years ago, a private lending group, I hold a majority stake in Extended Whitlock Development, a bridge loan to keep his projects from collapsing. Preston Whitlock has never met me. He has no idea that the plain old contractor his daughter refuses to be seen next to is the anonymous name at the top of the paper he signs every quarter. He thinks his lender is a faceless fund in Delaware. The whole family that told my son I wasn't good enough to sit in their crowd was sitting in a house of cards that I could knock down with a single email. I finished my bourbon, I washed the glass and set it in the rack. Then I opened my laptop. The screen threw blue light across the dark kitchen. I logged into the bank. Most people think a wire transfer is gone the second you hit send. It isn't. There's a window, a short one, but a window, where the sender can pull the authorization back if there's fraud. And what had been done to me was fraud. A father agrees to pay for a wedding. He does not agree to pay for a party he's been banned from attending. The deal I signed and the deal they were running were two different deals. I found the $90,000 transaction. It was still pending. I clicked recall, selected unauthorized, and confirmed. The screen refreshed. The money would sit in my account. And in the morning, the Ashford estate would get a notice that their funds had failed to clear. I wasn't done. I opened the credit card. I found Danny's name under authorized users with a little toggle beside it that said active. I clicked it. Inactive. Then, because I wanted to be sure that the next time he tried to swipe it for the florist or the bar tab, it came back as a dead piece of plastic, I reported the card lost. The site asked if I wanted a replacement mailed. I clicked no. Then I opened my email and I wrote to Marcus Webb. Marcus has been my lawyer and my poker friend for 25 years, and he also manages the LLC that owns the condo. Marcus, prepare a notice to vacate on the downtown unit, 30 days, and reset the rent to full market on any renewal. No family rate, send it first thing tomorrow, and pull the Whitlock development file. I want to talk about calling the note. Ray, I hit send. I sat back. I thought I'd feel guilty. A father is supposed to protect his son, but a father is also supposed to teach him. And somewhere along the line I'd done the first job so well that I forgot the second one entirely. So life was going to teach him now, and life doesn't grade on a curve. I closed the laptop, and that's when I made the decision that felt like the biggest one of all. I walked to the closet, took my good suit off the door, and hung it in the back behind my winter coats. I wasn't going to wear it to be a guest, but I wasn't going to burn it either. I had a feeling I'd be needing it Saturday for something else, entirely. The phone buzzed again. Danny. I let it ring out. A text came through a minute later. Dad, my card just got declined at the restaurant. Is something wrong with your account? Call me. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't say a word about the message he'd sent an hour before, banning me from his wedding. The only reason he reached out at all was that the tap had run dry. That told me everything I needed to know about who my son had become. I held down the power button until the screen went black. Then I went to bed, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I didn't lie awake worrying about him. I'd done everything I could. Whatever happened now was his to carry. Outside, the wind was picking up. It sounded like weather coming. And it was. It just wasn't coming for my house. I was up at 6 the next morning, which is nothing new. I made coffee, ate 2 eggs standing at the counter, and went out to the driveway to start on the truck. There's a slow leak in the power steering I'd been meaning to chase. I like working with my hands in the early light before the neighbourhood wakes up. It settles me, I had the hood up and my head down in the engine bay when I heard the tyres. You learn to know cars by sound after 40 years. That was the Lexus, coming way too fast for a residential street, and it came around the corner and slammed to a stop at the mouth of my driveway hard enough to chirp the front tyres. Both doors flew open. Danny got out first. He looked like he hadn't slept. His hair was flat on one side, he was wearing yesterday's shirt, and his face had the particular panic of a man whose whole plan just fell out from under him. Behind him, out of the passenger side, came Sabrina, pink sweatsuit, sunglasses covering half her face at 7 in the morning, a phone clutched in her hand like a weapon. She slammed the car door hard enough to rock it on the springs. That got my attention more than anything Danny could have said. You don't slam a door on a machine like that. But then, it wasn't hers, and people are always careless with things that aren't theirs. "Ray!" she called across the driveway, and her voice came out sharp and shrill. "What did you do?" I didn't look up right away. I finished checking the fitting I had my wrench on, then I straightened up slow, wiped my hands on the rag hanging out of my back pocket, and looked at the two of them standing in my driveway. Danny came up the concrete fast, his dress loafers slipping on the frost. Dad, you have to turn your phone on. Do you have any idea what's happening right now?" "I'm fixing my truck, Danny," I said. "You know I like to concentrate when I work." Sabrina marched up behind him and shoved her phone at my face. The screen showed a payment decline message. "Do you know what this word means?" she said. Declined. I was standing at the spa. I was in the chair. They'd just finished my hair for the rehearsal. And when I handed them the card, the machine made this awful sound, and everyone turned to look at me. Everyone. The girl behind the desk said it was reported stolen. She looked at me like I was a criminal. "That does sound embarrassing," I said. My voice came out flat, and I meant it that way. "Embarrassing?" Her voice cracked up an octave. "You need to call the bank right now and tell them you made a mistake. Tell them you pushed the wrong button, you're old, whatever. Just fix it." I folded the rag and pushed it back into my pocket. "I'm not calling the bank," I said. "The card wasn't declined by accident, Sabrina. I reported it stolen. And the wire for the wedding didn't fail on its own. I pulled it back last night." The two of them went still. I watched it land on Danny's face, watched the panic tip over into something closer to horror as he finally understood this wasn't a glitch. This was an answer. "Dad," he said, and his voice dropped to almost a whisper. "You got my text. I'm sorry, okay, it came out wrong. It's just Sabrina's family is a lot, and You told me not to come to your wedding," I said, "because I look like I work for a living. You sent it in a text so you wouldn't have to hear my voice, and you told me not to call because you were tired." I nodded slowly. "So I stopped calling." "This is insane," Sabrina snapped. "This is a tantrum. You're a grown man throwing a fit because your feelings got hurt. We have guests flying in. We have a schedule. Just give us the money and go back to your little truck. Look at you. You're covered in grease. You look like the help." I looked down at my hands, black at the knuckles. Then I looked past her at the Lexus idling at the curb, warm exhaust rising off the tailpipe in the cold air. "You're right," I said quietly. "I am the help. I'm the help that's been paying your rent for 3 years. I'm the help that bought that car you just slammed the door on. And since it turns out the help isn't welcome at the party, I don't see why the car should be either." I walked past both of them, down the driveway toward the street, taking my keys out of my pocket as I went. "Dad, what are you doing?" Danny's voice climbed. "Dad, we need that car. We have to pick up the groomsmen." I pressed the fob. The Lexus chirped and unlocked. I opened the driver's door and got in. The seat still had the shape of Danny in it, and the whole car smelled like Sabrina's perfume and somebody's takeout. "That's our car!" Sabrina shrieked, running toward me on the driveway, her sneakers slipping on the frost. "You can't take our car." I rolled the window down as they reached me. "It's not your car, Danny," I said. "It never was. My name is on the title. My name is on the insurance. And I'm not invited to the wedding, so neither is my car." I put it in drive and pulled away from the curb. In the mirror, I watched my son standing in the middle of the street with his arms hanging at his sides, looking as lost as the day he got separated from us at the state fair when he was 6. Sabrina was next to him, screaming at the empty air where the car had been. I drove it around the block, pulled it into my garage, and put the door down. Then I went inside and locked the front door and poured a second cup of coffee, and my hands weren't shaking from fear, They were shaking from something that had been building for a long, long time. The landline rang. I let it. I knew they'd try to get back into their condo, try to scrape together anything they could sell for fast cash. And I knew that Marcus's notice had gone up on that door at 8 sharp. What I didn't know yet, what I couldn't have known standing there in my kitchen, was what they'd already done to get their hands on money. I found that out an hour later, when I drove to the condo to see it for myself. The condo sat on the 9th floor of a building I could see from the highway. I'd walked every inch of that unit before I bought it. New floors, new fixtures, a view of the river, a place a young couple could build something in. I parked in the visitor spot and rode the elevator up. I could hear them before the doors opened. Sabrina was pounding on the door of the unit with the flat of her hand, and Danny was pacing the hallway with his phone to his ear, trying to reach somebody who could fix what couldn't be fixed. Marcus doesn't miss deadlines. When he says the locks change at 8, they change at 8. Danny saw me step off the elevator, and the fear on his face curdled straight into fury. He didn't look like my boy anymore. He looked like a stranger who'd decided I was the only thing standing between him and everything he thought he was owed. "You locked us out," he said, coming down the hall at me. "Everything's in there. My tux, her dress for the reception, our passports. You can't do this." "It's a lawful notice for a lease violation and non-payment of market rent," I said. "Marcus posted it on the door. Did you read it?" "I don't care about the notice." He was close now, chest heaving. "Open the door, Dad. Open it right now." I had my keys, but I didn't reach for them. I just stood there and looked at him. "I own this place, Danny," I said. "I've owned it the whole time. You've been living in my building at 1/3 of what it's worth so you and your friends could pretend you'd made it. And this is how it gets paid back. A text telling me to stay home." He stopped. Something new crossed his face when he heard that I owned it, a flicker of calculation, and I watched him do the math on how much he'd misjudged. Behind him, Sabrina had gone quiet for the first time all morning. "Get your things at noon tomorrow," I said. "Marcus will open the door for 1 hour. Clothes, documents, personal effects. The furniture is mine. I bought it. Everything you brought that's actually yours you can take." I turned to go, and that's when I saw the door to the unit was already cracked open behind them. Not forced, just left ajar, the way you leave a place when you are in a hurry and you've already taken what you came for. I pushed it open the rest of the way and stepped inside. The place was a wreck. Not damaged, just treated with a kind of careless contempt that was somehow worse than damage. Clothes on every surface. Takeout containers gone sour on the counter I'd installed. A champagne bottle sitting open and flat on the granite. They'd been living like squatters in a place most people would have wept to own. But that's not what stopped me. What stopped me was the wall. Over the fireplace there'd been a painting. Eleanor's. She wasn't a professional, my wife, but she could catch light on water in a way that made me stop and look every single time. She'd painted the old fishing dock at Table Rock Lake, the summer before she got sick, the two of us sitting at the end of it in the little figures, and I'd hung it over that fireplace myself when I gave them the place. It was gone. There was a clean rectangle on the wall, a shade brighter than the paint around it, and 2 empty picture hooks and nothing else. My chest went tight. I walked down the hall. There'd been a second painting there, the wildflowers off Route 66 near where we used to stop for pie. Gone. I went into the bedroom. On the dresser, Eleanor's jewellery box sat open and empty. Her pearls, the ones I gave her for our 30th. Her mother's ring. All of it. I stood there in the middle of that room and turned in a slow circle. And every wall was bare, every hook was naked, and my heart was going hard and heavy. Not panic. Dread. The kind that tells you the thing you're afraid of has already happened. There was a piece of paper half under the bed, yellow carbon, the kind you get from a certain kind of shop. I picked it up. Meridian pawn and loan. 3 oil paintings, amateur. 1 string of pearls. 1 estate ring. Cash paid out. $1,100. $1,100. That was the price they'd put on my wife. On the last things her hands ever made, they'd hocked her whole memory for $1,100, and I'd have bet the deed on the building that the money went straight into flowers, or a bar upgrade, or a bigger cake for a party I wasn't allowed to attend. The dread drained out of me right there on that floor. What came in behind it was clean and cold and steady, and it scared me a little. How calm I felt. Because that receipt changed everything. This wasn't a father and a son having a bad week anymore. This was theft. And I still had one card left to play that neither of them could see coming. I put the receipt in my shirt pocket, right over my heart, and I went out into the hallway where they were still standing. "You sold your mother's paintings," I said. My voice didn't rise. That's what made Danny go pale. "You sold her pearls, you broke into the safe in that closet, and you sold her ring." "Dad, I can explain," he started. "You sold her for $1,100 to buy centerpieces," I said. "So no, there's nothing left to explain." Sabrina found her voice. "It was old junk," she said. "Amateur stuff. We were going to buy it back after the honeymoon." I looked at her for a long moment, then I took out my phone, and I made the first of the 3 calls that ended this. The first call was to Chet Halloran. Chet runs a collector lot on the south side, and he's bought and sold classic iron with me for 30 years. When I read that pawn receipt, something had clicked, because $1,100 was too clean a number for 3 paintings and a handful of jewellery. That was a partial. There'd been more, and I knew where I'd find the rest. "Chet," I said when he picked up, "tell me a kid named Danny Sutton didn't come through your lot in the last 2 days." There was a pause. "Ray," Chet said slow. "He said it was his. Said his old man passed and left it to him. He had a title and everything. Signed over. I gave him 38 for it." "Ray, was that was Eleanor's car, Chet," I said. The line went quiet. In the garage at home next to my truck, there'd been an empty space I hadn't let myself think about all morning. A 1966 Mustang, Wimbledon white, that Eleanor and I pulled out of a barn in 1985 and rebuilt over 3 years of Sunday afternoons. She sanded the body herself. She named it. It was the car we drove away from our wedding in, and it was the car I'd promised her I'd keep running as long as I could turn a wrench. Danny had a spare key, and Danny had forged my signature on a title transfer and sold his dead mother's car to a collector for $38,000 because he needed the cash and he knew I'd never sell it. "Don't let it off your lot," I told Chet. "The signature's forged. That sale's void and we both know it. I'll be down Monday to make it right on my end, and I'll cover you whole. But that car doesn't move." "You got it, Ray," Chet said. "I'm sorry, I truly am." I hung up. Danny had gone the colour of ash. The second call was to Marcus. "Pull the trigger on the Whitlock note," I said. "All of it. I want the acceleration letter drafted today, and I want a certified copy in my hand by 4. Danny didn't understand that one, but Sabrina did. Her head came up like she'd heard a gunshot. "What did you just say?" she whispered. I put the phone in my pocket. "Your father's company is 2 years behind a wall it can't see over," I said to her. "Whitlock Development would have folded 18 months ago if a lender hadn't stepped in and carried it. You want to guess who that lender is, Sabrina? You want to guess whose money has been keeping the lights on in that Greenwich house you're so proud of?" She didn't answer. Her mouth opened and closed. "It's the man who looks like he just came off a job site," I said. The third call I didn't make in that hallway. The third call I made from the seat of my truck. And it was the shortest one, and it was to the Ashford estate. Because I wasn't done. I was going to that wedding after all. The Ashford estate is a limestone mansion, an hour out of the city with a long gravel drive lined in oaks, the kind of place that rents you the feeling of belonging to a world you don't for the price of a small house. I pulled my truck up the drive at 3:45, past a line of black cars and rented sedans, and I parked it right at the front steps where a valet in a green vest came trotting over, waving his arms like he was flagging down a train wreck. "Sir, you can't leave this here. This is the ceremony entrance. Deliveries go around the—" "I'm not a delivery, son," I said, and I got out. I was wearing the suit, charcoal, pressed the night before, the shoes shining like black glass. From the neck up, I looked like a man who belonged, but the truck told the old story, and to that kid, I was just a confused stranger who'd wandered into the wrong day. A big man in a dark suit with an earpiece stepped into my path at the doors. Security. He had the look of a man who liked the part of the job where he got to stop people. "Invitation," he said. "I'm the groom's father," I said. He smiled, and it wasn't a nice one. "Yeah, I got briefed on you. The couple said an older gentleman might try to get in. Said to keep him out no matter what, so we're going to turn around and get back in the truck." "Get me the manager," I said. "There's no manager coming for you, pal." I took a breath and I let out the voice, the one I used to use across a warehouse floor, over the scream of impact wrenches, the one that didn't ask for anything. It just landed. "Get me the manager," I said, "or you can explain to your boss why you turned away the man whose company holds the service contract on this building." Something in his face shifted. He touched his ear and murmured into it, watching me the whole time. A minute later, the front doors opened, and a thin, nervous man in a good suit came out fast, sweat already on his lip, because he was the one who was going to have to explain a missing $90,000 to somebody above him. He stopped when he saw me, and then he did something the security guard did not expect. He straightened up, and he said, "Mr. Sutton." The guard blinked. "You know this guy?" "Sutton Fleet holds the maintenance and grounds contract for the whole estate," the manager said, without taking his eyes off me. "Mr. Sutton's people service this building." He swallowed. "Sir, I'm so sorry. I didn't know you were connected to today. The wire, it reversed this morning. You were about to throw the couple out," I said. "I know. I reversed it." He stared. "You? But why?" "Because I don't pay for services I'm not welcome to receive," I said. "Is that not right? Wasn't I told to stay home?" He had no answer for that. I walked past him and past the guard, who was studying the floor now like it owed him money, and I stopped and put a hand on the guard's shoulder as I went by. "You are doing your job," I told him, "but next time find out who holds the paper before you tell a man to get off the property." Then I walked into the ballroom. The room was gold and glass and full of light. 200 people in tuxedos and gowns, waiters moving between them with trays of champagne I'd paid for, centerpieces of white orchids on every table that I now knew had been bought with the money from Eleanor's pearls. Up front, on a little raised stage under a spotlight, stood Sabrina in her wedding dress with a microphone in her hand, and she was mid-sentence, her voice trembling with a practiced kind of grief. "And it just breaks our hearts that Danny's father couldn't be with us today," she was saying. "He's been struggling for a long time. Some very difficult personal issues. We tried so hard to help him, but for everyone's safety, we had to make the hard choice to let him stay home where he's comfortable." A soft murmur of sympathy moved through the crowd. Poor Danny. Poor Sabrina, carrying so much on their special day. I started down the centre aisle. The carpet swallowed my footsteps, so I got halfway to the front before the first head turned. Then another. The turning spread backward through the room like a wave until every face was pointed at me, and the murmur died all at once, and the string quartet trailed off into a sour scrape of bows. Danny saw me from beside the stage. Whatever colour he had left drained right out of him. Sabrina followed his eyes, and when she found me, the microphone dipped in her hand. I didn't stop. I passed the table where Preston and Camille Whitlock sat, and Preston had a forkful of salmon halfway to his mouth, and it just hung there. I climbed the 3 steps to the stage, and I walked up to Sabrina and held out my hand. "Give me the microphone," I said. "No," she whispered. "Security. Someone get security." "Security works for me tonight," I said. "The microphone." She looked at the crowd. She looked at her parents. She looked at the doors. And she understood there was no move she could make that wouldn't make it worse, so, with her handshaking, she gave it to me. I turned to the room and I tapped the head of the mic twice, and the thump rolled out across the ballroom. "Good evening," I said. "I'm sorry to interrupt. I know you were enjoying the wine. It's good wine. I should know. I paid for it." Nobody laughed. Nobody moved. "My name is Ray Sutton," I said. "I'm Danny's father, and whatever you had just told about me, none of it's true. I'm not sick, I'm not unstable, and I'm not a danger to anybody in this room, unless you count telling the truth out loud as a kind of violence." A ripple went through the crowd. This was not the script, and they leaned in. "The reason I wasn't sitting in the front row where a father belongs," I said, "is that last night my son sent me a text and told me not to come. He told me his bride couldn't relax knowing I'd be here, looking like a man who works for a living. He said I'd embarrass her family, her sophisticated family." I looked right at the Whitlocks. So I stayed home. The room was dead quiet. "But here's the part I think you all deserve to know," I said. I reached into my jacket and took out the folded wire confirmation. Because even though I wasn't good enough to sit in the crowd, I was apparently good enough to pay for the whole thing. I read from the paper. $90,000 to the Ashford estate from Raymond Sutton. I lowered it. "The champagne in your hand. The dinner in front of you. The flowers on every table. That was me." I turned to Danny. He was crying now, silent, staring at the floor. "You wanted to be a prince, son. I said. But a prince doesn't throw out the man who built the castle. Then I took out the pawn receipt. And when I stopped the money this morning, I said, my son didn't come to apologise. He went to the home I gave them to live in, rent that I've quietly covered for 3 years, and he cleared it out. He took the paintings his mother made with her own hands. He took her pearls, her ring. My voice held steady. And this morning he forged my signature and sold the car she and I rebuilt together, the car we drove away from our own wedding in, so he could have cash in his pocket today. I held up the yellow slip. He sold the last pieces of his mother for a party she wasn't alive to see. Those orchids behind me, those are her pearls. That's what they became. You could have heard a pin drop. Even the waiters had stopped. So no, I said, quiet now, but it carried to the back of the room. I'm not sick. I'm just a father who's finally done paying for the honour of being ashamed of. And then I did the last thing. I looked at Preston Whitlock, sitting there grey in the face at his table. Mr. Whitlock, I said, you and I have never met. But we do business. Your development company would have collapsed 2 years ago if a lender hadn't carried you. You've been signing quarterly paper to a fund you've never seen a face behind. I let it sit for a second. You're looking at the face, and that note is being called in as of 4 o'clock this afternoon. Your daughter told my son I wasn't good enough for this family. I set the microphone down on the stage. It turns out this family's been living on my money longer than my son has. The whole room seemed to exhale at once, and it turned into noise, chairs scraping, voices rising. Camille Whitlock had her hand over her mouth. Preston sat like a man who'd been shot and hadn't fallen yet, and Sabrina, in her wedding dress, turned to my son. Is that true? She said, loud enough for the tables to hear. Your father owns my father's loan? Danny couldn't look at her. You told me your family had real money, she said, and her voice climbed. You told me the old man was just being difficult. You told me there was an inheritance. There is, Danny said, and I heard him grab at it like a drowning man grabs a rope. There is, Sab. He's angry. He'll come around, the money's still... There's no inheritance coming, Danny, I said. It was the last thing I said in that room. Not anymore. There's a forged title and a criminal complaint that my lawyer is drafting right now, and there's a young woman who I think just figured out what you actually have. Which is nothing. Sabrina looked at him for one more second. Then she pulled the ring off her finger, dropped it on the stage, and walked off the platform in her wedding dress. And she didn't look back at him once. I walked down the steps and up the centre aisle, past 200 people who'd been told I was crazy, and none of them said a word. At the doors, the manager was standing straight and pale. I stopped in front of him. Clear the room, I said. The party's over. I drove home in the dark with the windows down, cold air pouring through the cab, and I didn't feel like celebrating. That's the part nobody tells you about a day like that. When you finally set down a weight you've carried for years, your arms don't feel light, they feel empty. I'd lost a son somewhere in the last 24 hours, and no amount of being right about it made that feel like winning. Danny called me 11 times that night. I didn't answer any of them. There was nothing left to say through a phone. Marcus called me the next morning. The note was formally accelerated. Preston Whitlock had already reached out through 3 different intermediaries trying to set up a meeting, which was funny, in a bitter way, because 2 days earlier, his daughter couldn't be seen in the same room as me. The forged title complaint was ready to file whenever I gave the word. I sat on that word for a week. I want to be honest about that, because a lot of these stories skip the part where it's hard. I sat with the paperwork in front of me for a week, because he was still my boy. I could still see him at 6, following me around the shop with a plastic wrench, wanting to be just like his old man. I don't know what happened to that kid. I don't know when he decided the man he'd wanted to be was something to hide from his fiancée, but I know that if I'd bailed him out one more time, I'd have been signing him up to do the exact same thing to someone else down the road, maybe to his own kids someday. Loving him didn't mean catching him. Not this time. Loving him meant letting him hit the ground and learn what the ground feels like. I filed the complaint. Danny took a plea. He'll do community service and probation and pay restitution he can't afford. And he'll have it on his record, and I think in about 10 years, if he's smart, he'll thank me for it. Or he won't. That part's up to him now. And for the first time in his life, it's genuinely up to him. Preston Whitlock lost the company. I didn't take any joy in that either. I restructured what I could and let the rest go where it was always going. Old money turned out to be exactly what I figured it was the night I ran the numbers. Smoke and a good tailor. I went to Meridian Pawn that Monday, and I bought back every piece. The paintings, the pearls, the ring. The owner didn't argue about interest. He'd seen the story go around and he handed everything over like it was hot. I unwrapped the painting of the dock right there on his counter and ran my thumb over the dried paint where Eleanor's brush had gone. And I'll admit my eyes got wet and I didn't care who saw. Then I drove down to Chet's lot and I brought Eleanor's Mustang home. I don't sit in that quiet house anymore the way I used to. I sold the condo to a young couple, a nurse and a lineman, for well under what it was worth, because the husband's hands were rough and I liked the look of them, and because they walked through the door and talked about where the crib would go instead of what they'd renovate. That felt like the right hands for it. The money from the Whitlock note and the wedding I never paid for went into something I set up in Eleanor's name. It's a scholarship fund for kids who want to go to trade school, kids who want to learn to weld and wire and turn wrenches and build things that last. It's the best money I ever spent. And this morning I put a bag in the trunk of that 66 Mustang, the car Eleanor named, and I pulled out of my driveway and turned west. Eleanor always wanted to drive old Route 66 all the way out, stopping at every ugly little diner and every painted rock. And we never did it, because I was always too busy building an empire for a boy who was ashamed of the hands that built it. Well, I've got time now. And I've got her car. And the light out here on the open road in the morning is exactly the kind of light she used to try to catch on canvas. And now I understand why she kept chasing it. I turned 64 years old carrying other people's weight. Ray the mechanic. Ray the husband. Ray the father. Ray the bank account. Out here on this road with the windows down and the engine she rebuilt running clean under me. I'm just Ray. And I'm not carrying anybody but myself. We spend our whole lives trying to give our kids everything we never had. And somewhere in there, we forget to give them the one thing they actually need, which is the strength to stand on their own 2 feet when the money runs out. I thought loving my son meant keeping the rain off him. All I did was raise a man who couldn't handle a single storm. Real wealth was never the number in the account or the label on the suit. It's being able to look in the mirror and respect the man looking back. And here's the last thing I'll leave you with, from a man who learned it the hard way. Never let anybody, not even your own blood, treat you like a resource instead of a person. Your dignity is the only thing nobody can pawn. And sometimes keeping it means letting everything else go. If you think I did the right thing, hit that subscribe button and tell me down in the comments. Would you have bailed your son out, or would you have driven off into the sunrise like I did? I'll be reading every one of them from a diner somewhere on Route 66.